many of our vices and many of the habits that you have in your life that you know are not helping you are there to give you a way to escape feeling some uncomfortable emotions. These uncomfortable emotions are really only powerful when you refuse to feel them and when you contract away from them. Allow yourself to feel the feelings, knowing that just like a wave, it's going to crash over you and then it's going to recede.
You're watching Developing Potential with Diana Keuilian.
Hi, friends. Welcome back. So today we are going to talk about one of the greatest life skills that you can build for yourself. And this is going to sound kind of interesting, but being able to tolerate uncomfortable emotions is one of the greatest life skills that you can develop. Now, as I continue to work with clients as a therapist, this is something that comes up time and time again. And if you look at your life, you can probably see places where you use vices to numb yourself and really to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions. And so today I really want to dive into this process and this very human experience of feeling that we cannot handle an uncomfortable emotion. So we're going to do something automatically to shield ourselves and to protect ourselves from this uncomfortable experience. But together, we're going to really look at what does it take to just sit with the uncomfortable emotion. And it's almost like you're at this, divide in the road. Am I going to take this way and just try to avoid the emotion and do things like eat or drink or distract myself? Or am I just going to go this way and I'm going to sit with the emotion and see what happens and see where my life goes from there? Last week, we talked about ego defense mechanisms. And this episode is intentionally following last week's episode because, our ego defense mechanisms kick in to, again, protect us from uncomfortable emotions, from uncomfortable realizations about ourselves. And so we really come back to this skill, which is why I'm calling it one of the greatest life skills that you can develop to be able to tolerate uncomfortable emotions. And I can say for myself, I certainly never thought about the fact that I would do things automatically to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions. And so for me, back in the day, I would turn to food, abusing food and eating things to make me feel better, right? And really to kind of numb myself. And then alcohol, which is something I've talked about a lot on this show, turning to a few glasses of wine or more to really just not have to feel anything, right? And we turn so quickly to these vices without really pausing to even pay attention to why am I doing this, right? Why am I going to binge Netflix right now? Or why am I eating even though I know I'm not hungry? What am I avoiding, right? And so that's the very first step to building this great life skill of being able to tolerate uncomfortable emotions. So the first step is just being aware of what's happening, right? And we call this giving yourself that pause. And the awareness it's like the seat of power. It is the place from where now you can make a decision, whereas before you were simply reacting. And this is a serious issue, right? Because I, can speak kind of lightly about how I, have turned to food or turned to wine. But this can really turn into, vices that start to really deteriorate your life, right? And maybe you see this in yourself where you're like, if I could just stop binge eating, or if I could just stop spending so much time, watching Netflix or doing whatever it is that you do. It could even be work, right? Just throwing myself into work so that I don't have to be present or to feel these uncomfortable emotions. And so awareness just being that first step, right? As you start to reach for that vice, giving yourself just a slight pause to become aware, like, oh, I'm turning to something right now. Why am I doing this? What happened right now that made me feel like I can't handle this, right? And just having that pause where we can notice, what was it? And we get into that seat of the observer, which I love to talk about, moving out of just experiencing the moment that experience of like, I need this thing, I need this food, I need this wine, moving out of that to watching what's happening inside of you. Like, wait, why do I feel like I need that? And so from here, from this place of awareness, now we have some understanding, right? We're connecting some dots as to why we're trying to reach for this vice. And now we're left with this choice, right? And the choice is, do I do this scary thing that I'm not used to doing, and that's experience this uncomfortable emotion, right? Sit with it, find out how it's actually going to feel, or do I avoid it? And so this is where it becomes really useful and really helpful to understand a little bit about emotions and the experience of an emotion. And so there's a doctor out there who she studies the brain, and she says that most emotions can be felt and then pass in 90 seconds, which if you really think about that, a minute and a half, the intensity of emotion can kind of peak and then start to get smaller in less than 2 minutes when you actually sit with it. But the fact is, for most of us, we don't even allow ourselves that 90 seconds to sit with the uncomfortable emotion before we're immediately trying to avoid it. And I think a lot of that is just not understanding that emotions can quickly pass. And there's this description of emotions like a wave. And maybe I've shared this before on the show, but this idea that an emotion will come and it's going to intensify and then it's going to go down. Just like a wave, you see waves crashing in on the shore, right? A wave is not going to be continuously coming in. It doesn't. It comes in and then it goes back. And so getting this understanding internally that no single emotion is going to overcome you and then have more power than you. So there's something about this fear, and I'm going to say it's an irrational fear that most of us have, and this aversion to being able to sit with an uncomfortable emotion. And I like to think of it almost like the monster that's under the bed. Because, remember when you were a kid and you heard something in your room, or you were just convinced that there's a monster under the bed. And maybe if you're anything like me, I would lay in my bed just paralyzed, like I couldn't move, because I was certain that there was something under the bed that was bigger than me, it was stronger and more powerful than me, and it had more control than I did. And this is how it can feel when we think of, being able to sit with our emotions. The emotions can feel bigger than us and more powerful than us. And we're paralyzed with this idea of having to look under the bed. And so just getting this understanding that you're actually much stronger than any emotion that you face. And when we try to avoid the emotion, it's like we're contracting away from it. And instead of making it go away, we're actually holding on to it. And so this negative emotion is being held on to inside of us, and it's going to grow and it's going to stay with us. And so the negative impact of this emotion is going to stick with us, versus if we just open ourselves to the experience of feeling this emotion, letting it crash over us, and then letting it pass, right? And not turning to our vices, not, going through the drive-through or getting yourself some kind of food because you might not even know why you're doing it, but you just know, like, I need to go and eat this, or I need to go out and drink, right? Or if you're into, doing anything else that numbs yourself, right? So just giving yourself that pause and knowing with certainty, like, I'm bigger than the emotion. Like, the emotion is not going to overtake me in a way that I can't handle. And just having this mental shift from feeling like you're smaller and less capable, less powerful than the emotion, to realizing, like, I can take it. Like, if you've ever been to the ocean and you've walked in, maybe up to your shins, and the waves have kind of crashed in and maybe kind of crashed around your knees and gone back, right? Depending on how far out you go, you're completely stable and you can let the waves kind of crash around your legs and pass. You're more stable than those waves. And so that's the point that I'm trying to get across here with having this mental shift about what it's like to experience an uncomfortable emotion and not going along with this automatic reflex of, I got to avoid this experience. So it really brings up the question, like, how do we do it? So when we're like, okay, you know what? I like this idea. I'm going to bring more awareness. I'm going to kind of look at, like, why did I get this reflex to want to avoid and want to soothe myself in this negative way? And then maybe you're even convinced, like, okay, the emotion's going to pass. I'm stronger than the emotion. Okay, let's do this. So what do you do now? Like, what do you actually physically do when you're sitting there waiting for this emotion to be experienced and then waiting for it to pass? Well, luckily, we have so many different ways to cope with it. And we really call these coping skills or grounding skills. And I like this idea of calling it a grounding skill, you know, with this picture of standing in the water, right? You're at the shore and you're standing like up to your shins in the water, and you want to be grounded. You want to be solid while that wave crashes around your legs, right? And so one of my favorite grounding skills is to focus on breath. And it sounds so simple because it is simple and it's so available, right? Like all of these other negative coping skills that we have of, you know, binge eating or drinking or whatever it is you do to numb yourself, it takes a lot more effort to get access to these than it does to just focus on breath. And so, you know, one of my favorite ones is the box breathing. And I like this one because you're counting while you're breathing. So breathing in for 4 counts, holding your breath for 4 counts, and then exhaling for 4 counts, holding your breath for 4 counts, and then repeating the cycle, right? Counting to 4. And if 4 is too much, then just counting to 2. In for 2, hold for 2, out for 2, hold for 2. And just repeating that cycle as you bring awareness to whatever the discomfort is that you have emotionally. And you're going to realize, the great thing about this is that once you do it a few times and you realize, like, whoa, like that wasn't that hard. Like, I can totally do this. And then you also build the confidence and also just that habit of doing this when something uncomfortable comes up, rather than turning towards some kind of vice that's going to get you worse off, right? We know this. As we contract away from uncomfortable emotions and we turn to vices, more uncomfortable things build in our life, right? And so this is a way to just expand yourself towards, you know, being open to feeling the emotion and then doing something grounding while it passes by. So doing the breathing. Another great grounding skill is visualization. And so this is something where, you know, you spend a little time in the theater of the mind, as Maxwell Maltz calls it, and you essentially create a place to go in your mind. And so Maxwell Maltz says to create a room in your mind where it's beautiful and it's calming, and you visualize everything down to the detail. You know, what it smells like, what the colors are like, what the temperature is and the textures, right? You practice creating the space in your mind. And with EMDR therapy, we talk about creating your calm space or your safe space. And typically these are scenes in nature. So if you love the beach or if you love the mountains, it's the same idea. You spend time creating this imaginary place in your mind where you can go to and your body feels that calm, right? And so again, this is you grounding yourself so that you can face this uncomfortable emotion and have some sense of soothing while it passes. And there's no wrong way to do visualization. It's essentially just creating a place where you feel safe, that you can really, really experience and picture. And so the more time that you spend creating this space and practicing this space in your mind, the more effective it will be. So there's other things that you can physically do, right? So like all of the self-care items. So for me, I love my Epsom salt baths. I light some candles, I put the nice smelling salt in. It takes me all but 10 or 15 minutes, but the whole process is very grounding, right? I can sit there and I can, experience a nagging emotion or something uncomfortable that's, worked its way up in my mind, and I can open myself, expand myself to it, being physically soothed in a very, healthy and adaptive way. So lighting candles, having some really nice, luxurious lotion that smells really good. For some of us, myself included, like smell is one of my favorite senses. And, immersing myself in a really pleasing smell can really help me feel grounded in a moment of uncomfortable emotions. Having a cup of tea, right? Anything you can do to kind of be physically pampering yourself and relaxing yourself so that you're able to face this uncomfortable disturbance that you have inside. Exercising a lot of self-compassion, right? Being that support system for yourself in this moment. Going back to this idea of if this uncomfortable emotion is like a monster under the bed, and you are just having compassion with yourself as you realize, like, this is difficult. In the past, I've turned to, alternate ways to distract myself and numb myself. And now I'm growing, right? And I'm facing this uncomfortable emotion, but doing it just with grace and self-compassion for yourself, and not expecting yourself to get it right away, or even, having self-compassion for the fact that you do have these uncomfortable emotions, because it's such a human experience. We're going to have a whole range of emotions. And the uncomfortable and painful emotions really only become a problem when we contract away from them, right? When we try to avoid them and pretend that they don't exist rather than just experiencing them and moving through them. A lot of people find that writing, like journaling or just doing free flow writing, is a really wonderful way to have some grounding and to just anchor yourself in the present moment and in the process of experiencing the emotion. Sitting somewhere peaceful and you're just free writing what you're feeling, right? Talk about, going directly through the wave versus contracting away from it. You're opening yourself to the experience of like, what is this that I'm feeling? I'm going to move through it. Another great way to really move through some uncomfortable emotions would be to have somebody to talk to, right? And this is, one of the main reasons for therapy, for talk therapy, is to have somebody there who you can verbalize your experience with this emotion to, and they can be there with you as you move through it. And if you're, not going to therapy, if you have a supportive person in your life who is able to just create some space for you to verbalize your experience of this emotion, and is not someone who's going to jump in and try to fix it, or jump in and try to give you advice, or get you even more fired up, right? You just need someone who's going to witness what you are verbalizing so that you can almost like help yourself through it verbally with a witness. So exercise is another great way to find some grounding as you face uncomfortable emotions and as you turn away from your vices that you've turned to in the past. And what I love about exercise is that typically if you're running or cycling or doing something with movement, there's bilateral stimulation, which is really the basis for EMDR therapy. It really helps us to process things. So if you use that time while you're exercising to intentionally focus on some of these emotions that have been coming up, right? Focus on those internal processes that maybe you've been avoiding, and allow the bilateral stimulation to really help you go with it and help you kind of move through it more quickly than if you weren't moving your body. So these are just some ideas. There are plenty of other ways that you can come up with for really healthy grounding while you face an uncomfortable emotion. I really hope that you will think about this concept of many of our vices and many of the habits that you have in your life that are not helping you are there to give you a way to escape feeling some uncomfortable emotions. And I want you to remember that these uncomfortable emotions are really only powerful when you refuse to feel them and when you contract away from them. And so I hope that this encourages you to really just allow yourself to feel the feelings. knowing that just like a wave, it's going to crash over you and then it's going to recede. And the process of allowing yourself to move through these uncomfortable emotions lets you to let go of them. Versus when you're turning to vices and you're contracting away from the uncomfortable emotions, they're just going to grow and they're just going to become this baggage that you carry with you through life that turns you even more intensely to these vices. So I hope this has been helpful, friends, and I hope it just gives you something to think about. So if you like this content, please like, subscribe, drop me a comment if this resonates with you, or if you think, you know what, maybe I have been really avoiding uncomfortable emotions, but now maybe I'm thinking like I can do this, right? So let me know what you think. I appreciate you watching, and I will be back next week with another message.
Thanks for watching Developing Potential with Diana Keuilian.